Welcome to It Takes All of Us, a NAMI Talks podcast hosted by the suicide prevention team at NAMI Maine. Our mission is to provide education and guidance to assist in suicide prevention, to encourage intervening with those at risk, and to support people in the aftermath of a suicide or traumatic loss. We deeply believe that suicide prevention works and is most effective when people have the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence to open up the conversation with someone at risk and connect them with help. It takes all of us to save lives. This podcast often addresses topics of suicide to include suicide loss and can be emotionally unsettling to some. If you or someone you know is in crisis or struggling with suicidal thoughts, please call the Maine Crisis Line at 1-888-568-1112 or text 988 to reach the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
Welcome to It Takes All of Us. My name is Joyce Morrisette. I'm the suicide prevention trainer at NAMI Maine, and I'm joined today on the podcast with Mary Gagnon, who is the Director of Suicide Prevention, also here at NAMI Maine. So September is Suicide Prevention Month, and you may not know that there are also global efforts underway around suicide prevention to raise awareness, reduce stigma, and promote and open up more conversations about suicide so that we feel more comfortable talking about it so that we can prevent them from happening. We know that about over 700,000 people lose their lives to suicide in the world each year. And in our own country in 2022, there were nearly 50,000 Americans who died by suicide. So for awareness, we will give you some brief updates about trends and data that we're seeing here in Maine. But what Mary and I really want to focus on is recognizing that suicide is stigmatized and opening up how do we have a conversation with someone who's in distress, who we're concerned about, and manage our own feelings of fear that can come up. So we'll be doing that. That will be our primary focus. Before we start though, we want to introduce a few basics. We are talking about suicide today, so please take good care of yourself. Make sure you're supported. Reach out for support if you need. If you or someone you love is in crisis or struggling with suicidal thoughts, reach out to the Maine Crisis Line at 1-888-568-1112 or call 988. And then we want to make sure that you know at the end of the conversation today, we will be sharing resources with you and also sharing links in the show notes for you to dive deeper. So, Mary, to begin, could you please tell our listeners about the Maine Suicide Prevention Program?
Yes, absolutely. So the Maine Suicide Prevention Program is a partnership between the Maine Center for Disease Control and NAMI Maine. Supported by the CDC, NAMI Maine conducts training on suicide prevention and postvention, technical assistance, and data collection. So Joyce, let's also share a quick summary of the trends that we're seeing here in Maine.
Okay, thanks, Mary. I'm happy to do that. So suicide remains a leading cause of death, and our rates of suicide in Maine are actually higher than the national average. So, for example, in most of our rural counties, they have higher rates of suicide. We know that males continue to consistently have higher rates of suicide both in Maine and nationally, and females are more likely to report suicidal ideation as well as attempts. When it comes to our adolescents in Maine, more of them are reporting that they're experiencing depression and seriously considering suicide, especially our girls. Our LGBTQ plus high school students are more likely to consider and attempt suicide. And we also know that about half of individuals who died by suicide in Maine reported a depressed mood or were diagnosed with a mental health problem. So given all this, it's really important that we have this conversation about suicide prevention. And prevention and intervention always starts with a conversation. right? So with Mary, we want to dispel a common myth, which will be review for some of you. But Mary, does asking about suicide, talking about it openly, does that plant the seed?
No, absolutely not.
Correct. So we just want to make sure we review this because the research and studies show that an at-risk person does not, this does not plant the seed when we ask them about suicide. It doesn't increase suicides. It doesn't increase suicidal thoughts. It's the right thing to do. So talking openly and responsibly about suicide actually can help a person who's struggling and even increase the sense that hope and help exists. So it's important to highlight that stigma, suicide stigmatized, this has softened some, but taboo still exists. And so now we know that planting the seed isn't a reason to stop us from talking about suicide. But know that it's common to feel uncomfortable. When I was first working as a nurse, I was uncomfortable asking, and so it can take some practice. One of the things people often are afraid of is doing or saying the wrong thing. But people can feel when we care about them. So fortunately, we can learn to manage our fears so that we can keep people safe and talk with them and become more comfortable having this conversation, asking about suicide clearly. So together with Mary, one of the things we do in our basic suicide awareness and prevention trainings is we have a 3-step intervention that we teach. And together we're going to break these steps down and give you some tips about how to approach someone who you're concerned about. One of the things we say in our training is if you're wondering, I wonder if this person is suicidal, that's your permission to ask, okay? So I'm going to let Mary begin with the first step.
Thanks, Joyce. So the first step is one that you've probably got down already. So it's show you care. This means listening carefully to understand when someone is saying something to you. Gently invite that story. So could you tell me about what you've been going through? Or I've noticed you've been withdrawing from us and giving away your things. What's up? Enable them to feel seen, heard, understood, and less alone, and avoid interrupting except for gentle prompts or clarification, that sort of thing. So really, until you show you care, you can't do the other steps because somebody needs to know that you care before they're
Perfect.
willing to open up
Yeah,
to you.
so that's perfect. So this is never about a checklist where we're just like, okay, I need to ask them these questions and get a yes or no. It's about caring and actively listening, just like Mary said. So after we've started connecting, and if we're concerned, then it's important to ask about whether someone's having suicidal thoughts. Clearly asking is basically demonstrating that we're not so afraid to talk with them about it, which opens up, the story even more and gives them permission to talk about it. It's also really the only way to know if someone's at risk is to ask. We want to avoid being vague because a vague question can bring a vague response. We want to be as much as possible clear and direct, but also we're not confronting them. This isn't an interrogation. We're partnering with someone, right? We care about them and we want to help. So I want to give you 3 examples of clear and direct language on how you could possibly ask about suicide. So the first one is very simple. Do you have suicidal thoughts? A second way might be, are you thinking of killing yourself? Sometimes we use a gentle assumption. How often are you thinking of killing yourself? Right? A third approach might be, do you want to end your life? So we're asking the question, and then we are letting them respond, and we're really listening to hear what is going on with them. We don't certainly want to pressure or force someone to answer the question, and sometimes until people feel comfortable, they may not start disclosing a lot in the beginning. So if we have some doubt, we can be gently persistent and ask the question in another way, again, non-judgmentally. And certainly if we are concerned that someone does have suicidal thoughts, then we want to learn more. We want to keep them safe and connect them with help and hope. So Mary's going to talk about the next step.
Right. And so that is the third step, Joyce, is to offer support and get that person some help. And so, we recognize that most people who are listening are not mental health professionals, and that's okay because we can all do our part to prevent suicide. So asking for help is really hard thing to do. And so for us to sort of step forward and engage that person and start the conversation is really often a relief, as we talked about earlier. So just engaging with them, showing you care, and then asking that question. And then if that question comes back with a yes, or I have been thinking about that, then we want to be there to offer some support. First thing we want to do is prioritize their safety. So we don't want to leave them alone. And we want to make sure that we stay with them as we get that support. Identify your resources. So that could be a physician, that could be a therapist, that could be, if you're within a system, that could be an administrator, for example, that could be your boss at work if you're in a workplace, for example, or it could be crisis services or an emergency department, if possible. So whatever that is, make sure that you are not leaving them alone when you're reaching out for that help. You want to be that warm handoff. And you want to make sure that they understand that this help that you're offering is because you care about them and because you care about how they're feeling, and you want to make sure that they're safe and well, and that the help that you're trying to get them is going to help them in that regard and lead them in that direction, hopefully. So Joyce, we've talked about what we can say, but some of our listeners might be wondering what more they can do if someone is really struggling. When might a crisis necessitate calling 911? Can you give us a few examples of that?
Sure, thank you. And just to say that some of the interventions that Mary was talking about, we will share resources with you. But yeah, when people are considering suicide, most of them are not on the verge of taking their life, of killing themselves. So not every situation is a 911 call. We want to be response able, like not under respond, not over respond. And so there are times when the risk of harm can be great and a person's life can be in danger and immediate help is needed. So observable warning signs of a suicidal crisis can include threatening to hurt or kill themselves, and looking actually for the means and method, or perhaps they have the means and method, and there's a plan and an intent to act. Those are serious warning signs. What can also be seen is this really serious distress with serious agitation and anxiety. So when you take these together, when someone really, their life seems like imminently at harm, at risk, then there are times to call 911 and get help, immediate help. Sometimes it may not be a suicidal crisis, but if someone certainly is very out of control or they're really impaired in some way, there are other times to call 911. But that would be for immediate support. And now we're going to share other resources because we have a wonderful Maine crisis line in Maine with 24/7 support. So Mary's going to talk a little bit about resources that are available to you here in Maine.
Yes. So as Joyce mentioned, not every crisis is a crisis that involves calling 911. That's for extreme, immediate danger. But there are lots of situations that don't necessarily meet that criteria, but we're still worried about, we're still concerned about. So one of the resources that you have is the Maine Crisis Line. Maine Crisis Line can be reached at 1-800-568-1112 or by using 988, which is a national number that'll redirect you to Maine's Crisis Line. You can also text 988 or chat using chat988lifeline.org. So there are lots of ways that you can reach out to that crisis line. And somebody doesn't necessarily need to be in imminent danger, at imminent risk. You can reach out to them if you're worried about somebody. You can reach out if you're not quite sure what to do. You can reach out if you have questions. What should I be asking? What should I be doing or saying to this person at this point in time? And they can give you some gentle guidance as well. Other resources that we have out there include NAMI National's helpline. They're at 1-800-950-6264, or again, you can text that helpline or friend if you're a youth to 62640. The Maine Warm Line can provide non-crisis support for adults as well at 1-866-771-9276. And of course, there are community resources as well, counselors, healthcare professionals. NAMI Maine also has some great resources for prevention and for support after a loss on our website, namimaine.org. So Joyce, is there anything else we want to include?
Thank you so much, Mary. So just so you know, as a reminder, again, we will have links to all these resources in our show notes for you. I think one of the most important things that we talk about in our trainings is that if you're supporting someone that you care about that's having suicidal thoughts, or you've been involved in a crisis, right, that can really make a difference. We know that that makes a difference. However, we also stress that it's really important that you have support for yourself, that you are involved in self-care, you're taking good care of yourself, and that you have a support network. So dealing with a crisis needs to be sort of a team sport. You know, getting support, having a place where you can talk and share the intense feelings you might be having. So getting good support for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, Joyce. It's, I just wanted to add, it's really important to make sure that you aren't trying to solve this by yourself. Get help as much as you can, and really don't keep a secret, or don't tell somebody you're going to keep a secret for them. Do let them know that you care about them and that you want to bring in somebody else who can be helpful to them. Because you care. But make sure, as Joyce said, that you're working as a team, that you're not trying to do it all alone. It's really challenging to do this sort of thing. And it can be frightening, and it can bring up your own feelings and maybe your own experiences as well. So
perfect. So we're winding up now, and I want to thank Mary for joining me in this brief conversation with you around awareness, recognizing the stigma, and how to open up a conversation. So that's what suicide prevention and intervention, really a big part of this is being comfortable enough, at ease enough to talk openly about this responsibly. So thank you for listening, and we appreciate you. And if you've enjoyed this episode of It Takes All of Us, please consider subscribing, sharing it. Suicide prevention works when we all do our part. We all have a role to play. So from Mary and me, we want you to be well until the next time. Thank you.